Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the MMA Corner News Show. As each week we come at you live, recapping the week's top news stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Bellabomb, the only pain reliever with the knockout power. Bellabomb.com. Check them out. Audio for today's episode is powered by Soul. Power, clarity, comfort. Soul Electronics. Get you some. I'm your host, Josh Davis, alongside my co-host for the day, featured columnist at the MMAcorner.com, Mr. Eric Reinert. Eric, how you doing today, brother?
It is a beautiful Sunday here in Madison, Wisconsin, and I can't complain about that.
No, you really can't. And if you're an MMA fan, you can't complain about this week. I mean, first off, in the middle of the week on a Wednesday, we had one of the best fight night cards, I think, in the history of fight night.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm not going to say that the card was the best card of the year or anything like that. It wasn't. But for free on a Wednesday night when you have nothing else better to do, yeah, this was the best card that the UFC has done. And then they catapulted it into Saturday with a UFC fight afternoon for us over here in the States. And to be honest, I mean, it was just a great week for MMA. So, with that being said, let's get straight into some news topics. And with all of the events that the UFC did this week, it has been a rather slow week for MMA news. And, you know, it's going to happen sometimes. They didn't release the UFC, I should say, didn't release a bunch of information related to what they're doing. Bellator, on the other hand, did come out with their next event. They're going to have the debut of Bobby Lashley. They're going to have Jack Congo versus LeVar Johnson, and then King Mo is also going to be on that card. So they're certainly stacking it. But as far as MMA news goes, there just wasn't a ton of it. But one of the big stories coming out of all MMA right now is exactly how close we are to the UFC actually signing Gina Carano and moving forward with Ronda Rousey fight at the end of the year, probably in December. Now, we all know that Ronda broke her hand, possibly is going to need hand surgery. She is going to need surgery, so she's going to be out for a bit. Timing-wise, this fight makes sense, timing-wise. But I ask you this, Eric, take away the timing, take away Ronda's injuries and that kind of stuff. Is there anything else about this fight that makes any sense to you whatsoever?
No! I can't be more emphatic or simplistic than that. This fight is, well, okay. Let me pose two scenarios here to you. If for some reason this fight ends up being for the UFC Women's Bantamweight title, it is going to be one of the worst bookings in the history of mixed martial arts. And it will indeed, you know, give credence to those who say that the UFC sometimes does itself a tremendous disservice in its booking. So there's absolutely no reason that this fight should be for the bantamweight title. For the following reasons. I mean, Carano hasn't fought since 2009. That's 5 years ago. 5 years ago. It's a long time. I wasn't even with my current fiancée, who I'm getting married to in 2 months, 5 years ago. And my life has been significantly different. What's she been doing for the last 5 years? Not like exploring some other athletic endeavor. No, she's been in Haywire beating the crap out of Channing Tatum. She was in, spoiler alert, turns heel on The Rock in Fast 6, which is a pretty good movie, all things considered. And now she's in the, sure-to-be blockbuster In the Blood, coming straight to digital platforms everywhere, I'm sure. So, it's not like she's been honing her mixed martial arts skills in the last 5 years to, come back and dominate. In fact, her last fight in 2009, she got starched by Chris Cyborg. So, this fight would purely be for the name recognition. And I hope to God it's not for the bantamweight title, particularly because Carano has fought one time at bantamweight in her career, and it was in 2006. So there's just absolutely no reason. I mean, why not wait for... I mean, if Rousey can't fight until December anyway, why not wait for Kat Zingano and Amanda Nunes to fight? And then if Zingano ends up being successful in that fight, then she gets the next shot at Ronda Rousey. I mean, she's the #1 ranked fighter in the women's bantamweight division.
Yep.
So to deny her an opportunity just to give Gina Carano a title shot, it would just be a travesty of the highest order. So the only way I could see this fight happening is if it's a catchweight fight, maybe 140, and it's not for the title. And, you know, if that's the case, I would almost like to see it on Fox as opposed to on a pay-per-view. Now, granted, this would, you know, do a pretty good jolt for any pay-per-view that the UFC would offer. But if the UFC were to offer Ronda Rousey, who's probably their biggest star, honestly, against Gina Carano, who, you know, I think her fame is inflated by we in the MMA community because, you know, we got to know her first as a fighter and therefore have kind of followed her career a little bit more closely than probably everybody else has. So I don't think she's as famous as a lot of people in our, you know, very wide MMA circles think she is. But, you know, she's still a name. She's still been in some Hollywood blockbusters and, you know, she's crossed over into mainstream media. So to have her come back, you know, for her fight into the UFC with the biggest star in the UFC, Ronda Rousey, for them to put that on Fox, I think would have the potential to draw in a hell of a lot of new fans. They make that the main event. They stack the rest of it with 3 really great fights. And it could be one of the UFC's, you know, 1 or 2 events a year that's specifically meant to draw in new fans. Yeah. So I would hate to see this fight for the bantamweight title. But, you know, hey, if they're intent on bringing Gina Carano back, it's not like, other than Kat Zingano, there's a lot of fighters in the women's bantamweight division who you could immediately name as credible challengers to Ronda Rousey's title. So, you know, sort of like you saw Anderson Silva take a quick sojourn into the light heavyweight division a couple times, and the fight against Forrest Griffin specifically springs to mind just because, you know, it didn't really have any significance in terms of rankings, but it was just like a cool fight between 2 guys that people like to see fight. Yep. So if they were to set up a situation like that, particularly on Fox when they'd have the opportunity to capture a whole big group of fans just due to the name recognition of both Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano, it could be a decent fight to make, but really only in those circumstances, in my opinion.
Well, I think the only way that this fight truly makes sense is if we just be honest and talk about what it is, and it's all about the money.
Yeah.
If we be honest and just fully admit, hey,
I'm an honest guy. I'm an honest guy.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And so, yeah, if we just fully admit that all this is about money and maybe some ratings, then absolutely this fight makes sense. But if you're talking about the future of the bantamweight division, it makes no sense. Because here's the deal. First off, while I love Gina Carano, I've met her. She's a very nice person. She's a good quality individual, and I love her to death. She's not coming back to be a full-time fighter. If she was, she'd already have the contract signed, and she had already been in the octagon. We've been talking about the possibility of this for going on 9-10 months now. If she truly wanted to be a full-time fighter, she had already signed the contract. She had already had a fight in the UFC. The fact that that hasn't happened lets me know that she doesn't want to be a full-time fighter. Now, if that's the case, why would you give her an opportunity, albeit very, very, very small, but still an opportunity to win the belt and have to defend it and put yourself in that position? Now, I think if this fight happens at this point in time, I think Ronda beats the crap out of Gina. I don't think it lasts very long. But on the off chance that Gina's able to catch Ronda with something, okay, and get the victory, and now is the UFC bantamweight champion, you have a champion that only wants to fight once a year. That's not going to cut it for your division. That's not going to cut it for your brand. That's just not going to do it. But she's the champion now. You know, you can't tell her she has to defend the title 6 times in a year. You know, it's not in her contract. So, you know, to me, so many aspects of this make absolutely no sense. However, if they do everything that Eric just said, throw this on Fox and do all those kind of things, yes, this is going to be a $1 million fight. Why? Again, we're being honest. MMA is a predominantly male fan base. That's just how it is. And then if you look at the demographics of the males that are the fan base, 18 to 36. Okay, you have 2 of the hottest women in all of sports fighting each other. As much as I hate to say it, because I do not condone this, but I guarantee you, you are going to have so many males in the 18 to 36 range with their butts on the couch watching this fight just because you have two of the hottest females in all of sports going at it. And again, I hate to say it, but it's fact. That's just
well, no,
how it is.
that's not a matter of condoning it. I mean, you know, facts are facts. If that's why people choose to watch, that's why people choose to watch. Hopefully, though, the folks that would tune in would actually, you know, you walk in with the sort of spectacle of sort of what you're talking about, of, you know, two attractive women fighting each other, and then hopefully the fight is good enough, or at least Ronda Rousey is dominant enough to make these guys go, holy crap, these two can actually throw down, and then you've got a whole new group of women's MMA fans. I mean, I'm being very optimistic here, you know, but
No, and obviously, you always want to hope for the best, and that would be what they're hoping for. It's just um, explaining it, why the UFC would do stuff and take
right,
away all the smoke screens, all the BS, just
right.
honest to God truth. This is why they would make that fight. And
It is
again,
one of the reasons for sure.
and from where I sit, again, I don't agree with it, but it makes perfect sense because again, you want money, you want some new fans, and this would be a good way to do it. Deserving. Here's the deal: if Kat Zingano beats Amanda at UFC 178, there is no reason Kat Zingano should not be getting the next title shot. She's already earned it. She earned it when she got victory over Miesha Tate. Had she not blown out her knee and then had the horrific death of her husband, she would have already gotten her title shot. So if she beats Amanda, nobody else should be fighting Ronda before Kat. Personal opinion. However, my opinion doesn't matter to the UFC. You know what does matter to the UFCs?
Money.
All of this.
Money.
Exactly, and that's the business they're in. Make no mistake about it. At the end of the day, they want to generate revenue, and making this fight would generate revenue. But again, I have to echo Eric's sentiments here. It should not be for a title, and it should not be on pay-per-view. Throw this on Fox, and they, first off, they'll make a whole lot more money off of it in the long run because they will be able to get
advertise the
fan
crap
base.
out of it.
Exactly.
They could do like a whole 2-hour pre-show beforehand. You know, it would be. They could make a whole day-long event of it on some Saturday when there's nothing else going on in the dead of winter.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. No, they could, and again,
in January or something after the playoffs are over.
See, it would be perfect. Would be perfect. Or you do it, January, the week off between the end of the playoffs and the Super Bowl.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
There's the Pro Bowl, but no one cares about the Pro Bowl.
Well, I mean, the Pro Bowl would be in the afternoon, and then this would, or are they doing the Pro Bowl at night? In any case, this would be in prime time on Saturday. So I mean, it would be sort of like the Pro Bowl would be the pregame to the hypothetical Rousey Carrano super fight.
Exactly. And I'll be honest, football is life as far as I'm concerned. I haven't watched the Pro Bowl in years. I have not watched the Pro Bowl since they put it in its new time slot between the championship game and the Super Bowl. I was always a big fan of when the Pro Bowl was the week after the Super Bowl. Anyway,
after the Packers are out of it, I stopped paying attention. I'm going to be honest.
All right, guys, moving right along. There are some other UFC stories going out, and this one, I know it's got a lot of attention, man. I know a lot of people are up in arms and all upset about this. And to be real honest, to me, given the situation of the division and where everything's at, this makes sense. But the UFC announced that Demetrius Johnson is going to be facing Chris Carasso for the flyweight title. To me, again, if you just go down and look at the division, Ian McCall just fought. He's not, going to be ready for a title shot. Joseph Benavidez isn't happening. Again, if you just go down the list, there's not a whole lot of worthy contenders, and Chris is a worthy contender. Now, if they were going to shelve DJ for 6, 8 months, this fight makes no sense. But they're not going to do that. They know he needs to make money. They know he's got to fight. He's done everything that they've asked of him. So they're going to keep him busy. And in order to allow him to continue to defend his title against people that he hasn't already fought, they have to reach at names that not everyone knows of. But Chris is very deserving. I actually like this fight. I do think that Demetrius Johnson's going to win the fight, but I don't count Chris out. I think Chris has opportunities to win this fight. And again, for the situation of the division right now and what the UFC needs to do to move forward, I think this fight makes perfect sense. I honestly don't understand why everyone's complaining about it.
Yeah, I mean, you raised some excellent points, and it's somebody on the MMA Corner staff wrote a really long piece about this earlier this. Oh yeah, that's right, it was me. Check it out on the MMAcorner.com, people that are watching. But basically, you'll get my full thoughts on this. But not to reiterate everything I said in that, because Josh said a lot of it. Between Demetrius Johnson and Chris Carriasso in the flyweight division is a wide berth of unavailable fighters, either due to recent activity, injury, or the fact that Demetrius Johnson has already whooped him once or twice. So, this fight makes sense not only from a divisional ranking standpoint, but also given the overall context of where we're at with UFC 177. Before the announcement of this flyweight title fight, UFC 177 really had one fight, the main event between TJ Dillashaw and Renan Barão, that really could have been considered purchase-worthy. And, I wrote another piece earlier this week talking about what the UFC could possibly do to alter its pay-per-view model. And I'm not going to reiterate all my points there, but the thrust of that article was that there needs to be a difference between, like a measurable on-paper differentiation between cards that you don't have to pay anything to see and cards that you have to pay $50, $60 to see. Yep. The UFC is now putting on 30 free cards every year. So obviously they're having to siphon off a lot of the more attractive, maybe fights that in past years would have been the third or the second or third fight on the main event, the main card of a pay-per-view, because they need to attract viewers to those free fights. But what's happened then is you're getting pay-per-views like UFC 174, which, obviously no offense to the fighters on that card, but it wasn't a very attractive card on paper, and the rumored buy rate figures, which are, again, rumored to be pretty abominably low for a UFC pay-per-view, reflect that. So, you have that to take into consideration, and then the fact that, you had another pay-per-view in UFC 176 that essentially had one buy-worthy fight. No offense to Gerhard Mousasi and Jacare Souza, who are getting, a main event slot on a free card, but that's not a fight that I think a lot of people want to pay $50, $60 to see. So again, UFC 176 was in a situation where they had one fight, the title fight between Aldo and Mendes, which again, a rematch, so I think that's questionable to begin with. But they had one fight that essentially was purchase-worthy. Once that fight was off the card, they had to cancel the whole thing. That is very telling. So the UFC simply could not afford to run into another situation like the UFC 174, where they have some ridiculously low buy rate because they had one purchase-worthy fight on the card, or UFC 176, where because they only had one purchase-worthy fight on the card, and then it was off the card, they had to cancel the whole thing. So they simply cannot afford, from a business standpoint, to go through something like that so quickly. So, the UFC was left in a situation where they needed to come up with a purchase-worthy fight. Again, there needs to be a difference between the free cards that you pay nothing for and the cards that you pay $60 for, which is not a small amount of money. And so for $60 to see Dillashaw versus Barão, and then, what's the co-main event there? Besh Correa versus Shayna Baszler, that's not a fight that people are going to pay money to see. So they needed to, again, find a way to differentiate UFC 177 from the other, say dozen or so free cards that are happening within sort of the 2-month range of UFC 177. So they, kind of went down their list. All of the other title fights are not available. Most of their other, sort of non-title holder popular fighters, your Rashad Evans, Carlos Condit, guys like that fans would recognize and pay money to see fight, are not available. So you're left with Demetrious Johnson, who happens to be healthy. He's a title holder. But then the problem becomes, like you said, Josh, you've got all of these guys that are unavailable between him and the 8th-ranked fighter, Chris Carriazo. So I understand where people are coming from in just sort of the on-paper matchup on its own. But the UFC needed another fight, another purchase-worthy fight that would make the card worth $50 or $60. Because some people might say, well, not a lot of cards have been worth $50 or $60 in recent months, and that's a big problem because the UFC needs to make its product worth what it's charging for. Otherwise, they're going to lose a large amount of credibility, very quickly if this continues to happen. So either they would have had to drop the price to say $35 or something like that for UFC 177, or add a fight that makes it worth the $60 at least on paper. And I think any card with 2 title fights, no matter what division they're in, is worth $60. And the fact that the second fight has Demetrious Johnson, who in my mind is up there with John Jones and Ronda Rousey as like the pound-for-pound best fighters in the sport. To me, it kind of doesn't matter who he's fighting. I'm glad that they're putting him against a top 10 fighter because, say what you want about Johnson Carriazo, at least he's fighting a guy who's ranked, as opposed to what we were just talking about, potentially Ronda Rousey versus the inactive for 5 years Gina Carano, because that's a marketable fight. You want to talk about, inconsistency. So at least Carriazo is, he has 3 wins. Yeah, his opponents haven't been that great in their previous careers before losing to him. He's got 3 wins in a row. He is a top 10 flyweight, and most importantly, he is available to fight Demetrious Johnson on, I think it's August 30th for UFC 177. So I actually, as soon as they announced the fight, I changed my mind from probably not going to buy it to absolutely am going to buy it, because now we've got 2 title fights, including one with Demetrious Johnson, one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And just like, you had Anderson Silva fighting Talis Latis and Patrick Cote, and, you had GSP fighting, maybe a few guys who won the #1 contendership because GSP had cleaned out every other logical contender in the division. You've got this situation with Demetrious Johnson given his dominance. But I'm more than happy to pay money to watch Demetrious Johnson fight against pretty much anybody. Chris Carriazo has as good a chance as anybody has had against Johnson, I think, to take the title from him. And just like TJ Dillashaw did against Renan Barão when he was a heavy underdog, Carriazo, who's fighting just a few miles from San Jose, because this card is in Sacramento, he's from San Jose, so don't take that in lightly either. He'll maybe be a draw for the people in Northern California who may otherwise have opted to do something else that Saturday night. But, he's got as good a chance as anybody. But most importantly, you've got now 2 title fights on a card that was otherwise looking kind of weak, including the one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in Demetrious Johnson. So I personally am actually very excited now for UFC 177, particularly because it's going to be the first UFC card that we see in like a month and a half.
Yeah, that's...
Or pay-per-view card, I should say.
Yeah, exactly, pay-per-view card. But I think the key point is take this fight off of UFC 177, and like you said, it is not a pay-per-view worthy card. And I'm a Dillashaw fan, I'm a Renan Barão fan, and while I do think that this is going to be another exciting fight, it's not $60 worthy by itself.
Right.
And so again, adding this fight to this card to me makes perfect sense. And if you guys are counting Chris out right off the bat, I'm telling you, y'all are mistaken. Yes, his wins have not been the greatest in the UFC, but the UFC is the elite. It's the best of the best. Guys don't always dominate other guys in the UFC. Sometimes they have ugly wins, and Chris is the guy that could just shock a lot of people and come out there and put a whipping on Demetrious. Now, again, I've said that I don't think that's going to happen, but I would not be shocked if he was the guy to dethrone him. I wouldn't be surprised about it at all. All right.
I would be super surprised because I would be super surprised if anybody defeated Demetrious Johnson at this point. But I think that would just touch off a new rivalry and a very needed, fresh rivalry for the flyweight division if Chris Carriazo is somehow able to beat him. I think it would be great for the division.
Well, in my illustrious career covering, following the sport, all that kind of stuff, I've learned a couple things. Is just when we start to truly think somebody's unbeatable, that is when they get beat. You had Fedor losing to Verdun when he shouldn't have. Obviously, we had Anderson losing to Weidman and throwing
Barrow to Dillashaw.
That was the next one I was going to mention.
I'm sorry, Jesus.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm a jerk.
No, you're fine. And see, great minds think alike. And
there
so,
you go.
no, once we start thinking that a guy's unbeatable, what I've noticed is they tend to think that themselves. And when you get that mindset is when you do become beatable. Now, I certainly don't think that Dimitri thinks he's unbeatable, because in the conversations I've had with him, absolutely not the case. That's not where his mind frame is at. But again, as you go on and just clean out divisions and all of that kind of stuff, that's when guys start getting beat. And a lot of people, even though GSP got the victory, not many people gave Johnny Hendricks a true shot against GSP, and he went out there and whooped on him. So what I'm getting at is don't sleep on Chris, because he could come out here and pull one of those performances and shock the world.
Right.
Now, with all that rambling being done, UFC Fight Night 46. I call it UFC Fight Afternoon 46, but anyways, this card yesterday was the highest rated card on Fight Pass. So I want to ask you this, Eric. Was it because the card was so good, and it was a good card? There were some great fights on it yesterday, no question. Or is this just, are we just now starting to see the growth of Fight Pass and more people getting their subscriptions and more people actually tuning in to these fights? Or again, was it just because Connor's that big of a draw and Ireland's that big of a draw? What are your thoughts?
I think it's actually both. I think that the card, one helps the other. I think that the card yesterday, especially the inclusion of Conor McGregor, who, like Chael Sonnen and guys like that, are very good at promoting fights with their mouth. So, the inclusion of him and fighting in his home country, I think, was the initial draw for a lot of people. So I think that fight in particular helped catapult Fight Pass to the things that we saw. But I don't think this is the last time. I don't think we're suddenly going to see a dip. I think just like I said, the UFC is putting on all kinds of non-pay-per-view events now, and I guess these could technically be described as pay-per-view, but you know what I mean. Yeah. So they've had to siphon off some fights that would otherwise have been on pay-per-view cards. Another example is Junior Dos Santos versus Roy Nelson versus Mark Hunt. Is that the fight that's coming up soon?
Yeah.
I forget if it's Dos. Yeah. So Mark Hunt versus Roy Nelson would have been just a killer featured third fight on a pay-per-view card. You could add that to any pay-per-view card, and I'm gonna probably buy it just based on that fight. Mm-hmm. So to have that as the main event, I think is going to do the same thing and attract a lot of fans. So, the UFC, I think they're just getting into their groove now, where they're realizing that they obviously want to have at least a semi-recognizable name in the headlining spot, and then beneath that they can kind of just stack it with fights where people might not recognize the names as big stars, but they're guys who are going to bring it. And Fight Pass and the free card should be, if the UFC is going to maintain this model that they have, means to promote the premium events on pay-per-view. And I think having an event like yesterday afternoon, or like Wednesday for that matter, where you've got guys who maybe aren't the biggest stars in the UFC, fighting in the lower positions, but still coming out and putting on a great show. I think that speaks volumes for what could be possible then on the premium pay-per-view events, where you're seeing the bigger names. So Fight Pass needed this because the UFC needed to legitimize the platform as a place where the only place where you can see certain really exciting cards. I don't know that this is going to suddenly trigger a giant subscription boost, but if the UFC kind of keeps this model, active, where they have a decent name at the top of the card, and then some pretty potentially very exciting fights underneath that, they could see a slow growth in the Fight Pass subscription rate. What I think they really need to do, though, is figure out, like WWE Network has done, ways to offer Fight Pass on different digital platforms. Honestly, I think the fact that you can only see Fight Pass, well, you know what? I might be speaking out of turn here. Josh, can you tell me if UFC Fight Pass is available like on PlayStation 3 or Roku or Apple TV, or is it just on computers at this point?
Fight Pass is just on computers at this point. I actually have Roku, and I love it, and they're currently in works to get the Fight Pass switched over. What Roku has right now is UFC TV, where you have access to the UFC inventory, but you can't watch Fight Pass events or anything like that. So
okay, that's what I thought. I just didn't want to speak out of turn. I think it's good to hear that the UFC is negotiating with Roku and companies like that to offer it on other platforms, because I think with people cutting the cord, so to speak, they're going to want to use their TVs and not have to jerry-rig something with their computer and an HDMI cable and also plug it into their stereo or whatever to watch something on Fight Pass on their television. So I think that's really going to be the UFC's next needed step here, is to offer UFC Fight Pass on platforms that are immediately available on one's television, rather than having to figure out how to hook up Fight Pass through your computer. I know for me that would make Fight Pass very, very appealing. I know it seems like a very small difference, but to be able to just kind of use my PlayStation controller to open up HBO Go or open up Hulu Plus, rather than like take my laptop, plug it into my thing, change the input thing, whatever. I think that in and of itself will help boost subscriptions to UFC Fight Pass. But cards like UFC Fight Afternoon 46 are certainly going to help, because they're going to increase the platform's reputation of having must-see type of events, and that's really going to be the key for the UFC to increase their subscription rate on Fight Pass.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to something you said about the WWE, the one thing that they're doing, which just kills everybody, is for your $10 a month, you get all their pay-per-views too, and that
is the reason that I purchased WWE Network, is because it cuts my annual WWE expenditure by like 80%.
And I haven't watched WWE in years. It's not because I'm not a fan. It's just the way my life has gone,
right,
taking me away from that. However, I would almost rather get back into WWE and just watch that full time instead of MMA, because it would save me so much money. You figure all the UFC pay-per-view events that we do each year, if they even, let's just say they did $25 a month for Fight Pass, I mean, still as consumers,
absolutely,
it would be so much better. And I agree 100% with everything you said about the computer, because I had this issue yesterday. I have kids. My kids like to use my computer, and when I'm watching fights, normally I'm covering stuff for the sites, so I'm using my computer. Now, yesterday I had to take my daughter's computer, because I had to plug my computer into the TV so I could watch it on the 60-inch plasma so I could actually see it. And then I had to steal my daughter's computer. Now she's, Daddy, I want my computer. I want to do. So no.
Let's watch Frozen.
Exactly, and that's exactly what she wanted to do, was watch.
I don't even have kids, and I know that. And
so it does make a whole lot more sense. Get it on Roku, get it on Hulu Plus or Amazon Prime, whatever you have to do, because again, it means that much to guys like me, where yes, we are the family men, and it might not seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal when you're trying to watch a fight and you got a kid screaming in your ear because you had to steal her computer. No, put that stuff on one of these other platforms, and I agree with you, Eric, 100%, that your market share, your revenue, all of that kind of stuff, your subscriptions are going to increase 100%.
I think you touched on something very interesting too, Josh. When you talked about, the UFC could charge $25 a month if they put all the current, I call them premium events. That's what they'd have to call them, but like pay-per-view events right now on Fight Pass. But the other thing that would do is, right now, the WWE, if they had a crappy pay-per-view event before and I paid $50 to see it, I was kind of mad afterwards because, I don't want to pay $50 to see some piece of crap show. And, that's how I feel right now when I pay $50 to see a UFC pay-per-view, and it's kind of unexciting. But if I'm already paying, if I'm already paying $25 for the subscription every month, the UFC can get away with having pay-per-view events that only have one really, purchase-worthy fight because I'm already giving them my $25. So it kind of doesn't matter if I buy it, if I watch it or not because they already have my money. And I think it would give them a little bit more liberty if they want to go in this direction of having pay-per-view events that are a little like lower quality on paper. Because for a large group of fans, they're not having to pay an additional $50 to see those. So it would kind of alleviate the pressure of the UFC to have really stacked cards for pay-per-view events. I'm not advocating this because I want to see their pay-per-view events be as stacked as possible. But if they were already, getting $25 a month for the pay-per-view on Fight Pass, they could occasionally get away with having a pay-per-view event that maybe didn't look as great on paper and still be like, you're only paying $25 a month.
And really, living in North America, where we do.
North America,
it's Canada, it's us, and as much as I love Mexico because they are a part of North America, even Mexico doesn't fall into this. It is just the U.S. and Canada. And who is just the U.S. and Canada? We're the only people getting charged for pay-per-view events. We are. There's no pay-per-view in England. There's no pay-per-view in Europe. There's no pay-per-view in Asia. There's no pay-per-view in Brazil. All those countries get it free on cable TV. We're the only ones that are required to pay these hefty pay-per-view price tags, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. I've been doing it for years, and I will continue to do it because I love this sport. However, if they threw out to us, again, as the carriers of the pay-per-view market, hey, we're going to give you guys this for even $30 a month, I would be so freaking happy. I would send a $1,000 thank you basket just because it would still save me money. So I do think that the UFC is looking to make some changes, but again, in order to carry all the salaries and do all the things they do, the pay-per-view revenue that they generate from us is huge. And again, when you get $70 million in pay-per-view buys, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of cheese, and it helps up an awful lot. And when you essentially cut that by 2/3 and just do a monthly subscription, I understand you're going to be eating a lot of costs, but you're going to get more people in the end because more people can afford $25 a month than they can $120 a month for 2 pay-per-view events. So
right.
It'll be interesting again to see how they continue to move forward. But I think the numbers that we saw yesterday is a good sign for us in North America that eventually maybe they might move everything to the Fight Pass digital platform for us, as opposed to continuing to make us carry these high pay-per-view costs.
I think if really what's going to come down to is if the pay-per-view rates, the buy rates keep going in the kind of southwardly direction, the UFC is not really going to have much of a choice unless they want to just lower the price of pay-per-view events altogether, which would kind of be an admission of failure, rather than what they could deem as like a celebration of the expansion of Fight Pass now with all the pay-per-view events and $25 a month or something like that. So it'll be the next 6 months. I think will be very telling with this to see what happens here.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that is going to do it for today's show. Before we wrap it up, Eric, any final thoughts for today?
Well, I was prepared to talk about Dana White and his comments about Nate Diaz not being a marketable fighter. So in the absence of another kind of final topic, I'll talk about that just for a little while. you know,
Good, because I'm going to piggyback it.
awesome. I'm sorry if I'm gonna take away some of your thunder here, but my biggest problem with covering mixed martial arts and just following it as closely as I do, and Josh, I'm sure you feel this as the owner of the MMA Corner. I'm sure you feel this like 100 times worse than I do. But like it's nice in some ways that the UFC kind of has a very unified power structure because they can more or less make the fights that fans want to see rather than having to kind of deal with all the machinations like boxing where, you know, you've got a few fighters out there who just, for whatever reason, are never going to see, you know, ring time against each other. But the problem with that is, you know, you run into situations where you have people at the very top of the UFC who their opinion becomes fact. And, you know, there's obviously a big difference between opinion and fact. And when you've got people who, you know, have a certain amount of power and nobody really telling them otherwise, their opinions become what they believe is the truth. And that, I believe, is what has happened here with Dana White and Nate Diaz. Obviously, Dana White, it appears that he has some kind of, they appear to have some sort of vendetta against each other, at least from a business standpoint, from what we've seen play out in the media here. And, you know, Dana White's latest volley is that Nate Diaz is not worth the amount of money that he's asking for because he's not marketable. Well, let me just run a few facts about Nate Diaz for you. He has 19 UFC fights and 12 post-fight awards. Those 12 post-fight awards put him tied with Anderson Silva and Joe Lozon for the most, number one, in UFC history. He also has, let's see, look at my notes here. He has 5 Fight of the Night awards, which is tied for third most all time. He furthermore knows how to stir up a rivalry, you know, in his way that he does with his fighter, you know, with his opponents. He's not the sort of like, you know, I don't mean to say that he doesn't have respect for his opponent, because I'm sure that he does from a combative standpoint, but you know, he's not the sort of guy that's going to walk out on stage, shake hands with his opponent, smile, you know, for the camera or whatever. He's going to go out, you know, give the old Stockton salute and you know, do his thing to market his fight. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of that's legitimate, and probably a piece of that is, you know, just from a professional standpoint. But needless to say, Nate Diaz is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. You can look at it on paper. You can look at a number of his fights. You know, I mean, he's been to decision at 8 times, but 4 of those times have been Fight of the Night, and the rest of the time he's finished his opponent or been finished. So, I mean, he's not the kind of, he's exactly the sort of fighter that the UFC probably wants in the octagon right now. So for the head of the UFC to claim that Nate Diaz is not a marketable fighter is simply disingenuous. And, you know, it's another instance of somebody's opinion becoming the truth because they don't have enough people telling them that they're wrong.
You are 100% right. And again, I love Dana White. You know, Dana, whether you love Dana or you hate Dana, Dana truly is good for MMA. Look what he has been able to do with
Absolutely. I don't know the guy, never spoken one word. He doesn't know who I am at all, so I don't want to pretend like I have any kind of personal insight. I can only go by what I've seen in the media, which is him spouting epithets about people that he clearly believes are fact when they are, in fact, opinion.
And I love Dana. I have the utmost respect for him. And I hate, you know, saying this, but in this case, it's the truth. Dana, you are wrong. You know, Little Diaz is a draw. Fans want to see him. Yes, he is a draw. He is a needle mover. Look at his 2.4 million views on Fox. You can say it's the lowest of all time, but guess what? It's not. The numbers don't back that up. In fact, it's one of the highest of all time. So I understand that, you know, there's the bickering and all that kind of stuff, and I get that. But in this case, the stuff that he says about Little Diaz just isn't accurate. Little Diaz is a draw. Now, does Little Diaz warrant the money that he's asking for? I have to be honest. I don't know. I don't know what he's asking for. Maybe he's asking for 400 and 400, you know, and if that's the case, then I'd have to agree with Dana 100% and say, you know what, you're not worth that because you don't get those kind of views. I mean, that's GSP money and you know, Anderson Silva money, and there's very few guys that get those those types of views. So if that's the kind of money he's asking for, then absolutely Dana's right when he says, no, the money you're asking for is nowhere near the amount of views that you get. But if he's only asking for, let's say, 100 and 100, then, I would kind of have to question, all right, maybe he is worth that. But I don't do the UFC's books. I don't do the UFC's finances. All I do is run a media site. And from my media perspective, I miss covering Nate Diaz. I miss hearing him talk trash. I miss seeing him, step up to somebody like that. I miss all of everything that comes with both the Diaz brothers. It's one of the reasons why I love covering the sport. So as a strictly media thing, get Diaz back in the octagon. I don't, if it's a money issue, come on, Dana, you've done it before. There are so many different ways that you guys can circumvent money issues that it really shouldn't be that big of a deal. That leads me to believe that there's some kind of underlying issue that we don't know about that is going on between either Nate and Dana, or even Mike Hogan, Nate's manager, and Dana, which is a very big possibility as well. So bottom line is this. I miss Nate Diaz. I miss Nick Diaz. I miss the Diaz brothers. I miss the Stockton slap. I miss everything about those guys. Get them back in the octagon. And here's the deal. Nate, if you're watching, listening, and you too, Nick, if you guys are paying attention, get your heads out of your rear ends and put them back on your shoulders. You guys are two of the best fighters in the history of MMA, and right now you're ruining the prime of your career over money. Get in there, fight often, fight 5 times a year. Trust me, you will make tons of money. The money will be there. Go in there, fight, go in there, whoop ass like you guys do. The money will be there. All right, don't ask for it. Just go in and do your thing.
I like to see them. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, Dana, to you real quick, please, man. Figure out what needs to be done. Get both of these guys back in the octagon. Don't let them pull their Diaz shit. All right, smack them both upside the ears. Grab them together and bonk them if that's what you got to do. Sit them down. Do what you do, just like Anderson Silva. Sit them down. Don't let them leave until stuff has been addressed. You do this all the time with other guys. Take the jet up to Stockton, track them down. They're probably at Nate's little house right now hanging out. Lock them in the bedroom. Get this done. And do it for all of us.
I kind of give them a little bit of respect, Josh. I have to be honest with you, because I think, and I'm probably in the minority here, but I think that the UFC's fighters are criminally underpaid. I think that there's such a giant disparity between what you see with the top fighters and what you see with even the number 5 ranked fighter in that division. Giant disparity, sometimes tenfold. And as much as I'd like to see the Diaz brothers back in the cage, I admire their taking a stand and saying we're only going to fight for the amount of money that we think we're worth, because I personally think that all UFC fighters should be paid at least 20% more, given the amount of money that the UFC is surely making. That's just one man's opinion. And I side with the workers, so you know what I mean? Like that's even if they're making thousands of dollars, I think they should be making even more with the amount that the UFC is probably pulling in. So I admire them for taking a stand, even though I want to see them back in the cage.
And Eric, you speak from experience because you are grossly underpaid by the MMA corner. It's very similar to what Zuffa does with their fighters. So,
you guys let me write 4,000 words on how the UFC should alter its pay-per-view model. I'm not going to get that from any other website unless I start my own. So I appreciate it.
No, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think the fighters are way underpaid, and I think. I'm not exactly sure what Nate's contract is. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But when I was looking at what the UFC discloses his contract to be, I was thinking to myself, holy crap, he does deserve to make more money. And as far as Nick goes, do I think Nick deserves a $500,000 flat fee to fight? Absolutely. I think through everything that he has done throughout the course of his career, everything that he has done for the UFC and helping them make money, all he's asking for is $500,000 $500,000. He's
He
not asking
deserves
for anything.
points. He deserves points on the pay-per-view money
See,
because
and
he is one of those kind of fighters that can, like, more than anybody else, can sell a fight. So he deserves points.
Exactly. And he's not even asking for pay-per-view percentages.
Right.
Just
Right.
a flat $500,000 fee. I don't think that's outrageous. Again, when you have someone like Rashad Evans who gets 400 or 450,000 to show and then 450,000 to win, I mean, really, But again, I'm not the UFC, and I certainly don't want to seem like I'm bashing them. I am just asking both parties, the Diaz brothers and the UFC brass, sit down. Here's the deal. I know the Diaz brothers very well personally. I've spent a lot of time with them. I love them to death. I actually consider them to be friends. I will say this. Dana, you're kind of like their father figure. You need to go out and act like it. Okay? Go in there, sit the boy down, and tell him, hey, look, son, this is how it is, and daddy up and get the deal done. All right, guys. With that being said, that is going to do it for today's show. A couple of housekeeping notes. A lot of events coming up. We will be back Thursday night to do the UFC prediction show for UFC live on Fox. Brown versus Lawler, Thursday night, 8 p.m. Giving you our predictions.
That's going to be so great. I am so stoked for that card. Holy crap.
It is going to be one hell of a card. I'm excited. Then we have the return of Bellator. All right, this is going to be the first Bellator event ever that Bjorn Rebney does not have anything to do with. Okay, this is 100% Viacom, 100% Scott Coker. This is the new Bellator. As much as I love Bjorn, and Bjorn's my buddy, we will always be friends. I'm so excited to see what Viacom and what Scott Coker are going to do with their brand of what Bjorn created. And that's going to happen Friday night. We will be here immediately following the event, giving you our thoughts, our recaps on everything that was Bellator that evening. And then Saturday night, immediately following UFC on Fox, we will be recapping what could be the fight of the year in Lawler versus Brown. So definitely make sure that you guys stay tuned into the site for that. If I didn't cover anything, go to the MMAcorner.com. You're home for all things MMA, and check that stuff out. Eric alluded to it earlier on the show. Obviously I read everything that goes out on the MMA Corner. But this was one of my favorite articles from last week. Go check his work out. It is up there on the MMAcorner.com. For Eric Reiner, you are welcome. For Eric Reiner, I am Josh Davis. Until next time, keep living the MMA Corner lifestyle.